You remember when it was like fun to be right? Yeah, so the first big report from the HHS was written with ChatGPT with completely fake sources. So that whole thing about like, why does he want all of this data? How will this help find autism? It's like, oh, it doesn't matter. He's just going to say that the data says we shouldn't have autistic people or vaccines. So, yay.
Well, I have Pride Month statistics
Ooh,
if we want to do that.
that sounds like a much more fun topic.
That is a much more fun topic.
All right, let's talk about that. We should make a podcast.
Let's make a podcast.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult, a neurodiversity podcast, the show where potential went to die. I'm one of your hosts, Ellie Michaels. I use she, her.
I am your other host, Jessica Michaels. I use she, they.
And today we have pride statistics, you said? What are we talking about?
Yeah, it is the first week of Pride Month, which
Woo!
is very exciting. Woohoo! And we've, I think, mentioned it here, but I don't know. It's not always something that I hear about in other neurodiversity conversations, but neurodivergent people are more likely than neurotypical people to be or to identify as LGBTQIA plus. And this has been identified in several studies. So there's a lot of crossover between the neurodivergent and the queer community. So, a lot of our audience statistically is going to be celebrating Pride Month along with us. I mean, everybody should celebrate Pride. It is definitely worth celebrating. But statistically, a lot of our audience will be part of Pride Month along with us.
Nice. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, everyone straight should celebrate pride. If you're in the, 2S LGBTQIA plus, we actually changed it to wrath this year because we're just mixing it up. We're gonna try a different deadly sin.
We know that autistic people out of all the neurodivergent groups, autistic people are the most highly studied when it comes to gender diversity. But autistic people, compared to neurotypical people, are more likely to be to identify as gender diverse. So not just who they are attracted to or who they are romantically interested in, but who are themselves identifying as gender diverse. And that can be, and they also are up to 5 to 8 times more likely to identify as just somewhere on the LGBTQIA plus spectrum. So that's autistic people specifically. And that's where ultimately we get the term neuroqueer, which is concept where queerness and neurodivergence intersect, which is generally how I refer to myself is neuroqueer, because for me those things do feel connected, honestly. I don't know how you feel, if your neurodivergence at all connects with your transness, or if you feel those things are related.
No, absolutely they are. So the thing that I really like about neuroqueer as a term and as a concept is that if we look at the historical meaning of queer and not just like, what my family shouted at me when I was a kid, more like it's a statement that you are not part of the standard model invented by advertisers in the 50s, where a household consists of a heterosexual couple. The man goes to work, the woman stays home and has kids. And that has to be the norm for everybody. Those gender roles have to be enforced, and they are the only natural way for people to exist. Blatantly false. But the statement of being queer is that that's not the only way that people live. That's not the only kind of grown-ups there are. That's not the only kind of family that there is.
Mm-hmm.
And adding neuro into there with our, core group of neurodiversity is also saying that a neurotypical cisgender heterosexual person is not the only kind of person. That
Mm-hmm.
just because you're neurotypical and you don't follow the standard pattern as put together by advertisers in the 50s doesn't make you invalid. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, there's room in society for you, and that there needs to be room in society for you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you get people talking about, like, oh, what's the evolutionary biology reason for gay people? It's like, well, kids always have two living parents. Never ever need kids that need to be raised by a couple that didn't make them or can't make them and thus has those time and resources free. New perspectives and different ways of doing things never help anyone. That's why we still live in trees.
I think for me, a part of being autistic is really analyzing social roles and you sort of take these institutions for granted, and then but when you start breaking them down and looking at them and going, well, why, this doesn't make sense, or I don't automatically come with this strong set of feelings one way or the other, like other people seem to. These sort of accepted social rules don't hold a whole lot of sway with me. So when I look at it objectively and go, well, that doesn't really make sense to me, or I don't know that I, feel like I should direct my actions in this particular way just for no reason, that sort of
Mhm.
leads automatically into questioning things like gender and orientation and all of these things that sometimes I think people just don't think about. Not to say that I think people are queer, they just haven't thought about it. I think just specifically looking at gender roles and these societal expectations and rules we've put around things like relationships and things like that, it's just never, that doesn't make any more sense to me than it does in a corporate structure. Why somebody who sits three desks down should make eight times more than I do, even though objectively they're not contributing any more to a company than I am. Like, those things don't make sense to me either. So a lot of it, or a lot of these rules don't make sense. And this isn't any different than anything else to me, where these structures that we've put up arbitrarily don't make any sense.
I agree 100%. And there is there there's at least anecdotal evidence for people are queer but just don't want to think about it or don't want to like admit it.
Maybe some, I far be it for me to say that applies to nobody, because I've long since, just about everything applies to someone out there, but I don't want people to think that that's in general what my point is, because it isn't. But then again, how many people do we know who were straight presenting, cis heteronormative couples, and then one partner or the other came out as trans?
Like everybody I know.
A lot. I mean, it people seem to think that this never happens. It happens a lot. And so I
Hmm.
think, so for us, maybe it's that type of idea isn't as strange as it might be to some people. But my main point is that neurodivergent people, gifted people, autistic people, ADHD people, just have this sort of often have this innate sense of questioning and fairness and just this slant to the way they look at things that doesn't necessarily match the typical worldview. And I think
Hmm.
also we have a tendency to be fairly introspective and analyze our own brains. I
Hmm.
think more than a lot of people, especially if you are an older person, a late diagnosed person, if you're a gifted adult, or if you're somebody who is a messy adult and was a gifted kid. Like, there's all these reasons why people kind of in our general set of experiences that, that this show appeals to, um, you spend a lot of time thinking about the way you think and
Hmm.
identifying the way you feel, and I think doing a lot of that can lead to a lot of discoveries and a lot of questions, and a lot of lack of taking things for granted. So I think a lot of that just goes hand in hand. When you're already used to questioning one big part of yourself, it's much more natural to question another part of yourself and another part of yourself than assuming, oh, my first stab at all of this was correct. I am exactly the person I thought that I was at 5 years old, and I've never changed. It just becomes second nature to do that type of analysis, I think.
Hmm. And again, going back to the part where we just don't think social norms are particularly important because we like there to be reasons for things.
Mm-hmm.
So pull up gayhomophobe.com, and it is nothing but governmental legislators who put forth some kind of anti-gay legislation, and then later in life it turned out they were gay.
Mm-hmm.
So these are people who had queer feelings, but they had chosen or been indoctrinated, but with it in everyone's sense, but they had instead chosen to reject that. They had
Mm-hmm.
believed that that was wrong. And thus they refused that about themselves and apparently lashed out at the rest of the world to our detriment because of that. If they were neurodivergent, I think there's a higher chance that they would have been willing to ignore that social programming, at the very least question it, and
Mm-hmm.
then maybe get to that self-discovery a little bit quicker without, harming quite as many people. It really does seem to be tied to our dismissal of arbitrary hierarchy and rules. You know, you have to stop at the red light before getting on the highway, except it's 2 in the morning and there's no traffic. And the purpose of that light is to stagger the rate at which people enter the highway. So I'm just going to run that red light unless
Mm-hmm.
there's a camera on it, you know?
And then I'll probably run it till the ticket comes in the mail.
Yeah. Well, I look for the cameras now, at least.
Eh.
So by the same token, someone says, this is how you perform masculinity. And they show you cowboys and they show you frontiersmen and they show you big burly guys in war and things. And you go, that's not how we do that now. You don't need to go fight bears. Why would I perform gender as you demand I do it if I think that's stupid and serves no purpose?
Anything that involves somebody eating hardtack, I think we need to re-examine.
Hmm. Especially
Mm-hmm.
the Lord of the Rings. We should rewatch that and re-examine it.
I think, when you look at the neurodivergent identities that we know amplify sensory experiences. So, whether that's ADHD, whether that's autism, whether that's dyslexia, or if you're just somebody who is highly sensitive across the board, these are things that we talk often about lights and sounds and but emotions can be felt more deeply. So if you think of things like dysphoria or gender euphoria, and you have somebody who is already super susceptible and then feels those things much more deeply, that can be something where it almost, to me, would make it so difficult to ignore, compared to
Hmm.
being neurotypical, because any feeling can be overwhelming, much less something that by definition is overwhelming, you know? So I
Hmm.
think that probably has something to do with it as well.
Yeah. Or you get the thing of always my favorite trope is the sexuality is a choice people eventually tipping their hand and going, well, I'm attracted to the same sex. Of course, everyone is. I just choose not to act on it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Border.
so here's the thing. There was this guy called Kinsey.
I mean, I really thought for the longest time, it just, and it's so very similar to my own neurodivergence is I thought that everybody thought like this. I thought everybody was like this. And so if everybody's like this and everybody is straight, then this must be what that is. It must
Hmm.
be, you
Hmm.
know? And so I can definitely see how it sounds silly, sort of when you explain it that way, but it's just so hard to realize. Well, I think for me, it was hard to realize there'd be anything special. To me, that was like a special, like different thing.
Hmm.
To me, there was nothing different about me. There wasn't anything that wasn't average or normal about me, meaning anything that was difficult for me or hard for me was a result of something that was my own fault, you know? And
Hmm.
so that same thinking, though, led me to think that, well, any thought patterns that I have are the same. They're average, they're normal, they're what
hmm
every other single person experiences. So it sounds silly, but I get it. I get it.
I don't think it sounds silly at all because a lot of the case, we just didn't have this kind of mode of living modeled for us. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was chatting with a new friend last night that I started playing a game with. Um, and I was talking about something about neurodiversity and how, it's really annoying that my brain won't form habits. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, like the neurotypicals wake up in the morning and they shuffle into the bathroom and they start cleaning their teeth and they're halfway through before they've completely opened their eyes. It just happens on automatic. That doesn't happen for me. My brain won't do that. It just
Mm-hmm.
won't. I have to
Mm-hmm.
wake up every morning and remember floss starting on the top right, going like this. Move to the bottom right, going like this. Put floss pick in trash can. Open mouthwash. Like each one of those steps is a separate entity that I have to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I brought up the example of, you spend weeks, maybe months, you spend ages getting into a fitness routine and you do it every day and you're really diligent and you're really proud of yourself and you're seeing results. And then one day you just forget
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't build as a habit. And you
Mm-hmm.
just forgot that day. And then because you didn't do it yesterday, you forget today. And then
Yep.
all of a sudden you realize it's been 2 weeks and you haven't touched your running shoes. And
Mm-hmm.
you feel so bad about yourself. And you think you're such a failure and this awful human being who's just lazy. Except that's not it. That's just that's not how your brain works. You have to put a post-it or a thing in your calendar that pops up, goes, hey, you're gonna go for a jog today. And she had no idea that that was a thing, and she had been struggling with that her entire life and thought that she was just the
Mm-hmm.
worst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Same thing with, I don't think gendery stuff makes sense, and all of these trans memes are really, they make sense and they're very relatable. Uh-oh. And maybe if before the age of 34, I had some meaningful trans representation in my media or in my social life or on the internet,
Mm-hmm.
I might have clocked that
Yeah. Yeah.
a little bit sooner.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I've spoken with, I have several clients who, this is, that are part of both queer and neurodivergent communities. And what a lot of them have said or figured out is that it wasn't until they really consciously tried to stop masking that they figured out that they were somewhere on the LGBTQIA plus grouping, because
Mhm,
everything felt artificial. When you're
mhm,
masking, everything is artificial. I mean, that's what masking is you're pretending, you're putting on another self, another personality to fit in. And what's the difference between going to the office and all day pretending like I am a person who is happy and smiley and and then going
gosh, I
on a
just
date.
love
Yeah,
spreadsheets.
yeah, and then pretending that the person across from you is the most interesting person you've ever talked to, and you just sort of, it's like when I thought that nobody was really happy, that was just a thing that people said, you know
Hmm.
because I didn't know that it was something you could feel. It's when you look at relationships, I think for the first several relationships I had, I was acting out what it would look like to be in a good relationship more than I
Hmm.
was coming about that organically as like, oh, this is how this person and I interact. It's like, no, this is I have a boyfriend and this is what I've seen having a boyfriend looks like, and this is what my friends do. So this is what I'm gonna do. And and so there really isn't, to me, those things are exactly the same thing. And so, but when you start breaking down those masking barriers when it comes to being neurodivergent and start trying to identify what does feel authentic, then it 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 makes total sense that you could do those things at the same time. So a lot of people, and it was kind of the same thing for me, where it was neurodiversity and queer hits like right at the same time because
Hmm.
you're opening up, you're not those can of worms. You're opening up those pathways, and you're opening up those lines of thought. So I think I think for multiple people, it all kind of comes together in this ball, of just,
Hmm.
oh, okay, this is what my brain is. This is who I am, and surprise, I'm just as surprised as anybody else. But it is masking isn't just social, and I think that's something that um is very true for a lot of folks. So yeah, there's a lot of not to mention the idea that stigma and misunderstanding are of course very, very large parts of being in either community. That's something you have to, living in a world that just isn't meant for you, living in a world where people don't believe that the way you are can be the way you are, or people thinking that the way you are is something that you can change or is wrong. Those experiences are very much the same. So yeah, so there's a lot of, any place where there are binary systems, there's, typical and not typical, and male or female, all of those have a tendency to exclude neurodivergent or LGBTQIA plus people. So lots of crossover.
Hmm. Hmm. And I mean, we always go back to the left-handedness thing. We are embarrassingly close to the days of tying a left-handed kid's left hand behind them at school or beating them to stop using their left hand. And if you are the only left-handed person you have ever met in your life, you're going to think that everybody really, really struggles to write with their right hand.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone has to experience trying to use their non-dominant hand as their dominant hand. But if you don't beat those kids and torture them to not doing that, they grow up to be left-handed adults, which is completely fine. It's just another version of human. We have a lot of versions.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you're a kid and you're having a real hard time writing with your right hand, people go, "Oh, left hand's a thing? Oh." And then you start doing that, and then life gets easier. You're
Mm-hmm.
not hand masking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. It's amazing how important having just one other example, one
mhm.
other idea of like, oh, that's a thing. Oh, I mean, that makes so much difference. It's why online groups, I think, are such critical lifelines for neurodivergent people and queer people, because you've just greatly expanded the number of people that you have, that you can can see all these experiences now. It's like, oh, okay. So not only do you find community and friendship, but it's like, oh, there's another left-handed person, and that
Mhm.
really does make a huge difference.
Yeah, and it's really not even necessarily seeing yourself represented, but just seeing the concept of that variation
Mm-hmm.
where, you know, uh, when I was first learning how to girl and you and I got ready for a concert together and you saw me genuinely enjoying like getting made up and dressed up and whatever, something clicked in your head and you said to me, "I have never once actually enjoyed doing this."
Mm-mm.
And that led to your going, oh, I guess I'm kind of a they,
Mm-hmm.
because you just hadn't had that kind of
Or kind of a,
possibility modeled.
I look at it as kind of more of a,
Yeah.
just eh,
The joke I always make in my head is that there's about a 70% overlap of neurodivergent and genderqueer, and that last 30% are just so neurodivergent they don't actually care about gender at all. They
yeah,
identify as meh.
yeah. I just don't. It's just not something that interests me all that much.
Yeah.
I don't care. It's to me the least interesting thing about a person.
Hmm.
It's just I would prefer to have nothing to do with it. So,
Yeah. That's that's called being agender, and that's a thing, and it's completely fine.
mm-hmm.
I mean,
I
I
would just rather sleep. Do you know how much I like napping?
yes, yes, I do.
It's like
That's why I
all the
have a little
work
makeup
it
mirror in
takes.
here, so I don't have to
Yeah.
wake you up.
Like all of that.
Yeah, because you don't get anything out of it. You don't like it.
None. Nothing.
I Some of
Zero
the best
things.
experiences of the past several years for me have been going to one of my friends' house before we're going out to like the club or something and just hanging out and being girly and getting ready together and talking about makeup and stuff. And it is great. It
I
is
just thought that was
fuel
so
for my
weird.
soul.
Like when people would have like, oh, girls' night, there's going to be wine and bathrobes and talking about stuff that I just could not care less about. I just, ugh, no,
Yeah.
it sounds so boring. So boring. Mind numbing. That sounds mind numbing.
What's the thing? It's not interesting in the way that, like, a good documentary is interesting or like a
Mm-hmm.
really good video game is interesting. It's just pleasant and comforting and affirming in ways that most late in life translators never really had. And
Mm-hmm.
it's great. I mean, the club is okay. Um, it's very loud, it's quite crowded, everything's expensive, but it's nice. But it's the going and being with the people and the doing of the things. That's the really awesome part.
My favorite part of all of that would be being done and leaving.
Hmm.
That's like the kind of thing where I start trying to figure out when it will be over the second it begins.
Yeah, I have a filter in my head of like, does it involve standing in the sun for several hours? Do the average decibel level of the event surpass a certain amount? And how much does this have to do with gender? And if it pops past any of those thresholds, I don't really bother inviting you because you're not going to want to go. I'll
No,
mention it, put it on the calendar so that we can, coordinate. But
bowling was fun.
bowling was fun.
I did not have to put on makeup for and I don't mind, like if I have to get ready, I don't mind it, but I don't like it. I don't enjoy it. It's not,
Hmm.
and I'll typically, if I do go out, I do put on makeup just because, I feel better looking less like me, I guess. Um, but
Just gonna point out that you with makeup doesn't look like you, is what you just said.
it looks better. It looks better than me
By whose standard? Yours?
and my mother's,
All right, just checking.
you know, like if I could wear contacts still,
We're not doing
but
contacts.
I'm
I
not
went
doing
blind.
contacts. That was bad news. Nope, it's glasses forever now. Um, yeah,
So it's like, see,
it's just there's just other things that I would rather do, like sleep. If I could sleep more, and I'd rather do that. So that's what I do. But
I rewatched
anyway,
Wicked for the 44th time, 45. What are we on?
I don't know. I've got to be above 50 at this point. I have to be because for a while I was just putting it on repeat. So, I don't know how many of those partial movie watches you smash together to make a whole film, but the new trailer is coming out this week.
Ooh,
So I'll be able to
ooh,
obsess over that for a while.
nice. Yeah, yeah. It's just like masking. Once the thing that really fixed the whole "oh, I don't think I'm cis" thing for me was making a trans friend and then hearing another trans acquaintance talk about when I was still trying to be a boy. And just the
Mm,
phrasing of that, I was trying to be a boy. And they're also agender. But the idea that if you're trying to be a boy, you're pointing out that not everybody has to try at that.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, oh, that's why I never liked any of those things, because I was trying to like them. I was trying to mask in that way. And then all of a sudden I had permission to not do that.
Yeah, and ultimately you find out you weren't doing as good of a job as you thought anyway. Like I was
No.
never as good at pretending to be normal as I thought I was. I thought I was rocking it. No.
Uh-uh.
No, I was very bad at it, which is why it felt like an alien because I didn't fit in and, so yeah, it never goes as well as you think it's going.
As a fish,
Mm-mm.
I thought I was so good at climbing trees.
Yeah,
Turns out, turns out, not actually very great.
exactly.
But I definitely don't think I would have been as willing as I was or readily capable as I was of figuring out I was trying to be the wrong gender if I were not also neurodivergent and a bit of a contrarian with the whole pathological demand avoidance thing. Because I'm willing to say things like that's a stupid rule. I'm not going to listen to that.
Just a little.
Yeah.
Just a little.
Yeah. And even now that informs my performance of gender. Like I know it would make some people feel much more comfortable if I presented femininity more like this, but that's not what I sound like. And it weirds out my wife, which is the only reason I do that voice. I don't wear frilly dresses and girly things when that's not the smart thing to wear. Like,
You always wear dresses and frilly things.
not today. It was rainy. I wore jeans and a tank top and a hoodie when I had to go out because it was rainy.
I guess I count the tank top as like frilly things
Mm.
because to me that's a girly thing.
Um,
But you mean like actual frills.
I think this is actually a men's tank top. I think this might be that old.
Hmm.
I don't know. It was one of those things I realized that's like both gendery and neurodivergenty is that once I stopped wearing like crew neck shirts, I realized how much I hated wearing crew neck shirts. And if you're presenting more femme, there's a lot more options for open necks on things. Um, so you don't just have to deal with I can only wear V-necks because that's the only like open collar that's acceptable to wear for someone presenting as mask.
I have never thought about the collar of my shirt one time. Not
Oh
ever.
my God, they drive me crazy.
Mm-mm.
See, if you've met
I'm
one neurodivergent person, you've met one neurodivergent person,
mm-hmm. Exactly.
all shapes and sizes. Well, I think that'll probably just about wrap it up for this episode of Gifted Kid, Messy Adult. Jess, where can people find out more about you?
People can find out more about my ADHD and autism coaching at coachjessicamichaels.com.
Awesome. And if you like our show, please rate and review us wherever you get your podcasts. For any other information, please email us your questions, comments, or just outright praise to giftedkidmessyadult@gmail.com. So until next time, take care of each other out there
Bye.
and learn to be yourself. It's fun and it's way easier.
Happy Pride.
Happy Pride.